People often ask me when my life truly split in two, and I always tell them it happened on a Thursday morning, the day the people I trusted most looked me in the eyes and took everything from me with a smile. I remember stepping into the design atrium with a quiet kind of pride, carrying the folders that held years of sketches, research, and projections, the kind of work you don't just build, you bleed for. My best friend of 9 years, Sarah, waved me over. "James, is that the proposal?" she asked with bright excitement. I smiled, thinking I finally had someone rooting for me, but her eyes flickered toward the glass boardroom where her brother Daniel, the golden boy of the department, was already waiting. I felt a knot in my stomach, the same kind you get before a storm breaks. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Trust me, James, we'll present this together. Your idea deserves the spotlight." I didn't know then that he was studying me the way a thief studies an unlocked door. I didn't know Sarah had already forwarded him my drafts, telling him James won't stand up for himself. I didn't know they had rehearsed stealing my future. When I handed over the binder, Daniel chuckled. "Relax, you'll get full credit." That sentence would hollow me out later. 3 days after that meeting, I sat in the auditorium, hands shaking, as Daniel stepped onto the stage holding my prototype like it was his newborn creation. "This vision," he announced, "is something I've developed over the past year." Applause erupted, people stood, cameras flashed. None of it was for me. Sarah leaned over and whispered, "You should be proud he used your ideas." All I whispered back was, "Not anymore." That afternoon, I circled a date on my calendar with trembling hands. Chermisday. The days that followed felt like slow poison spreading beneath my skin. Daniel didn't just take my work, he rebuilt his entire persona around it. People clapped him on the back, calling him brilliant, visionary, the future of the company. Every time I walked past him, he smirked with that quiet cruelty only liars have mastered. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him in the break room, I said, "Daniel, you know that was my design." He didn't even flinch. He sipped his espresso and said, "Ideas belong to the people strong enough to claim them." My breath caught. "You promised," he cut me off. "You really thought you were leadership material? You barely speak in meetings, James. You're ornamental." Ornamental. The word hit harder than the theft itself. That week, HR summoned me for a misconduct review, claiming Daniel had reported inconsistencies in my documentation. Fabricated, of course, but mud sticks, and soon my access was restricted, my project permissions revoked, my coworkers avoiding me like I carried a disease. Sarah walked by my desk one morning, leaned in and whispered, "Don't make this worse for yourself. Daniel's meant for big things." I felt something inside me crack. That night, I cried in my car for nearly an hour. My father found me later, sitting on the floor of my room, shaking. "Tell me what happened," he urged, but the words wouldn't come. They were too tangled with shame. I kept repeating, "It wasn't my fault," just to convince myself. Before sleeping, I whispered the date again. Chermisday. I didn't know how or when or what I'd become by then, but I knew Daniel Hale would remember it. I didn't turn into a strategist overnight, but pain has a way of shaping you into something sharper than you ever intended to be. For weeks, I floated through the office like a ghost, humiliated, dismissed, invisible. But grief eventually stops begging for mercy and starts building armor. One night, staring at Daniel's promotional announcement email, a thought whispered through me. What if I'm not meant to break? What if I'm meant to rebuild differently? I opened my laptop and began gathering every digital breadcrumb I could find. Old drafts, metadata trails, time-stamped prototypes, screenshots of Daniel praising my idea before stealing it, versions he had edited but not carefully enough to hide the digital fingerprints. I didn't know exactly what I was constructing, but I knew it was bigger than revenge. It was truth sharpening itself. I started wearing a mask of quiet compliance at work, nodding politely whenever Daniel boasted about his innovation, while documenting every inconsistency. I met my friend Maya late at night in a small cafe lit by orange lamps. "James," she said, after I explained everything, "if you can prove this, you could end his entire narrative legally." Her words lit a spark of clarity inside me. Daniel thought silence meant weakness. He had no idea silence was where I rebuilt my power. One afternoon, I overheard him telling another manager, "James was never meant for leadership. He's just background material." Background material. The phrase carved itself into my memory. I whispered to myself, 3 days until Chermisday. Someday. I didn't yet know the format my revenge would take, but the seed had rooted itself. I wouldn't strike in rage. I would strike in precision. 6 months passed. Enough time for the world to assume I'd accepted my place beneath Daniel. Enough time for me to quietly evolve into someone he no longer recognized. In the evenings, I studied forensic documentation, metadata reconstruction, financial tracking, skills that felt foreign at first but soon became second nature. The more I learned, the steadier I grew. Meanwhile, Daniel ascended effortlessly, shaking hands with executives, laughing loudly in hallways, flaunting promotions built on the bones of my work. "Still here, James?" he'd ask with a tone dripping fake sympathy. "Not everyone can be exceptional." Every insult became fuel. One evening, while combing through archived emails, I found his first mistake. He had forwarded my prototype to a vendor 3 weeks before presenting it as his original concept. The timestamps were perfect, undeniable proof he had the material before claiming authorship. My heart pounded, the first crack in his empire. I sent it to Maya instantly. She responded, "James, this is huge. Look deeper." So I did. I requested a meeting with Priya, a former teammate who once collaborated with Daniel. She arrived with trembling hands and said quietly, "I know what he did. He asked me to delete some files before his presentation. I still have the originals." My breath caught. "Why now?" She sighed. "Because someone like him shouldn't lead people." That night, for the first time, I didn't whisper Chermisday. I said it aloud. It tasted like resolution. It no longer felt like revenge. It felt like justice finally stretching awake. The final piece fell into place the night Daniel publicly humiliated me for the last time. It was a corporate networking gala. Soft jazz, dim lighting, champagne glasses everywhere. I stood quietly near the back when Daniel approached a group beside me and said loudly, "James still works here? Poor guy thinks hard work matters." People laughed. Others looked away in discomfort. My cheeks burned, but something inside me solidified instead of shattering. He added, "Some people create greatness. Others watch it happen." Then he smirked at me. I simply replied, "Congratulations on your upcoming promotion, Daniel." He lifted his glass. "Well deserved, don't you think?" I met his eyes and said softly, "Time will tell." He didn't understand the weight of my words. By then, I had discovered something worse than idea theft. Daniel had been inflating vendor invoices and pocketing the difference through a shell company under his cousin's name. Thanks to my new skills, I had the proof. When I showed Maya, she whispered, "James, this could end his entire career." That night, I circled the date of his promotion ceremony again, tracing the red ink slowly. Chermisday. Not the day I ruined him, the day he ruined himself, and I simply held up the mirror. As the weeks drew closer to the day I had circled on my calendar, the atmosphere around the office began to thicken in a way that made my skin prickle. Marcus walked with the unearned swagger of a man convinced his rise was unstoppable, shaking hands with people he once ignored, planning celebratory dinners with board members, and bragging loudly about his visionary leadership. While he basked in attention, I moved like a quiet shadow, gathering every remaining thread of evidence. I worked at night, long after the office lights dimmed and footsteps faded, reviewing invoices, emails, and approval chains. Every forged signature and every misdirected payment was another piece of the truth he thought would never surface. Revenge built on anger collapses, but revenge built on patience becomes inevitable, and mine had matured into something frighteningly precise. 3 weeks before Chermisday, an unexpected email arrived from a former vendor. The message began innocently, but quickly became a dagger. "We wanted to thank you for the designs Marcus submitted years ago." Years. My pulse hammered. That meant the theft had started long before the betrayal I remembered. When I showed the email to Sophia, she inhaled sharply and said, "Emma, this proves intent. This isn't just unethical, this is criminal." That night, doubt flickered through me for the first time. Could I really dismantle someone so deeply protected, someone who had spent years building a kingdom on the foundation of my stolen work? I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, staring at the evidence sprawled across my table like fragments of broken trust, and whispered, "Is Chermisday worth it?" Then I remembered the humiliation, the whispered insults, the quiet suffering. The answer returned with icy clarity. Yes. Chermisday wasn't destruction, it was restoration. The closer Chermisday crept, the more dangerous every hour felt. One quiet afternoon, while transferring encrypted documents onto a secure drive, I heard the soft click of my office door opening behind me. My breath hitched. Marcus stepped inside with a smile too polished to be genuine. "Working late again?" he asked lightly, "still trying to prove something?" I forced a calm expression, though my heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Just catching up on reports," I said, casually moving a notebook over the USB drive. His gaze swept across my desk with unsettling sharpness, lingering for a moment too long. I feared he saw everything, my plan, my preparation, my patience sharpening into a weapon. Instead, he chuckled, tapping the doorframe. "Relax, Emma. Ambition looks desperate on you." He left with that smirk carved on his face. I waited 10 minutes before releasing the breath I'd been holding. That evening, my brother Aaron arrived with takeout, setting containers on my table as he assessed the exhaustion I couldn't hide. "You barely sleep anymore," he murmured. "I'm starting to worry." I stared at the documents scattered across my laptop screen, feeling the crushing weight of secrecy. "I'm fixing something that was taken from me," I whispered. He studied me for a long moment before saying, "Just don't lose yourself." I wished I could tell him everything, but the risk was too great. The next day, Priya approached me quietly, slipping a folder into my hands. Inside were handwritten notes and original drafts Marcus had ordered her to destroy. "If he finds out I helped you," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "He won't." Every ally felt like a miracle. Every document felt like a heartbeat counting down. Chermisday was no longer approaching, it was breathing down my neck. 1 week before Chermisday, rain drummed steadily against the windows of the small cafe where I met Sophia and a forensic accountant named Riley Chin. The air smelled of cinnamon, wet pavement, and anxious anticipation. Riley spread documents across the table, each page another nail in the coffin Marcus had unknowingly built for himself. "This," Riley said, tapping a highlighted section, "directly connects Marcus to the overbilled vendor payments. The shell company he used isn't even cleverly disguised. It's arrogance." Sophia leaned closer, her voice low. "With Priya's testimony, the timestamps, and this financial trail, the board can't ignore what he's done." My hands trembled around the mug I held. "This could end everything for him, couldn't it?" Riley nodded firmly. Companies don't overlook financial misconduct. He won't just lose his promotion, he'll lose his career. I felt the weight of that truth settle into my bones. For months, I had been piecing together fragments, each one sharper than the last, but hearing the full picture spoken aloud made it real. "Are you ready for what comes after this?" Sophia asked gently. I stared at the raindrops racing down the window, thinking about the nights I had cried alone, the credibility I lost, the dreams I thought were gone forever. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm ready." As we packed up, my phone vibrated with an email from Marcus. The subject line read, "Big day is coming." I opened it. "Hope you'll attend, Emma. Maybe you'll learn how real leaders operate." The audacity almost made me laugh. Stepping out into the rain, I felt droplets soak through my hair and clothes, but for the first time, the cold steadied me. I had purpose, I had allies, and most importantly, I had proof. 3 days before Chermisday, the entire office buzzed with anticipation for Marcus's promotion ceremony. Floral arrangements filled the lobby, caterers toured the event hall, marketing interns rehearsed his introduction as though preparing for royalty. Everywhere I turned, people polished his pedestal a little higher. Meanwhile, I finalized the digital presentation that would dismantle him from that very pedestal. Every slide had been crafted with meticulous care. Timestamps, voice recordings, emails, financial documents, vendor statements. It was airtight. That evening, I requested a private meeting with Helena Brooks, our CEO. When I entered her glass-walled office, she looked up with her usual composed expression. "Emma," she said, "what brings you here?" My throat tightened as I placed the USB drive on her desk. "I need you to see something before the ceremony." She held my gaze for a long moment before plugging it in. As the slideshow unfolded, her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to cold fury. When the last recording played, the one where Marcus said, "We'll bury Emma's involvement, no one will look twice," her jaw clenched. "How long have you been collecting this?" she asked quietly. 18 months, I replied. Silence filled the room like static electricity. Finally, Helena exhaled slowly. "I will not allow this company to elevate a fraud, but you need to be prepared. This will be public." I nodded. "That's what I want." She leaned back in her chair, studying me with something between admiration and disbelief. "Then we'll handle this. On Chermisday." As I walked out, a strange calm settled over me. Fear no longer clawed at my ribs. Doubt had vanished. The path was clear, and there was no turning back. The night before Chermisday stretched endlessly, each hour heavy with anticipation. My apartment felt too quiet, the ticking clock too loud. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible outcome: chaos, denial, outrage, collapse. But beneath it all, I felt an odd steadiness, like a storm preparing to break. Around midnight, Aaron knocked on my door carrying steaming tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. We sat on the couch, the warm mug grounding me. "Em," he murmured, "whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm not doing this out of revenge," I whispered. "I'm doing it because someone needs to hold him accountable." Aaron nodded. "And because he hurt you." I looked at my trembling hands. Yes, he did. He hesitated before asking, "Do you think he suspects anything?" I shook my head. Marcus doesn't believe consequences apply to him. When morning came, sunlight crept across my floor, and I dressed in a simple black outfit that made me feel controlled and unshakable. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I wasn't the woman crying in her car 18 months ago. I was someone forged by betrayal, sharpened by truth, steadied by purpose. As I left, I whispered, "It's time." The office gleamed with gold banners and congratulatory posters. Marcus stood near the stage, laughing, admiring himself in the spotlight. He didn't glance at me once. If he had, he might have noticed the cold storm behind my eyes. I walked toward Helena, who waited calmly at the side of the stage. My heartbeat slowed into a steady rhythm. Chermisday had arrived, and everything was about to change. When the ceremony finally began, the lights dimmed and a soft orchestral track filled the auditorium, giving the room a false sense of grandeur that made my chest tighten. Employees whispered excitedly, ready to witness Marcus step into the spotlight he believed he deserved. I stood off to the side with Helena, feeling my heartbeat settle into a calm, chilling rhythm. Marcus walked onto the stage with the confident grin he had perfected over years of manipulation. "Thank you all for being here," he began proudly. "This promotion marks the beginning of a new era for our division." The applause thundered through the hall as he basked in his own illusion. When the noise finally faded, Helena stepped forward with a poised expression. "Before we proceed," she announced, "we have a special presentation." Confusion rippled through the audience. Marcus stiffened and whispered sharply, "What presentation?" Helena simply gestured toward me. His face paled. "Emma, the floor is yours." I walked to the podium, each step steady, each breath controlled. "Good morning," I said softly. "Today isn't just about celebration, it's about truth." Marcus laughed nervously. "Emma, not now." "Do you know what today is?" I asked, cutting him off. The room fell silent. "It's Chermisday." Gasps echoed as I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared, an email thread with metadata proving my original concept was mine alone. A wave of shock swept across the audience. Marcus barked, "This is out of context," but his voice trembled. I played the audio file where he said, "We'll bury Emma's involvement." Priam rose from her seat and said clearly, "He told me to delete her files." Chaos erupted. Marcus stared at the screen, face draining of color as the truth began shredding the image he had built. The atmosphere shifted from admiration to horror as slide after slide illuminated Marcus's deception. Financial trails, forged approvals, inflated invoices, and payment transfers to a shell company tied to his cousin appeared in flawless chronological order. Each file struck him like a physical blow. Riley stepped forward from the audience, holding an official folder. "Independent forensic review confirms these transactions as fraudulent," he said firmly. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the podium for support. "This is an ambush," he shouted. "They're lying. She's lying." His voice cracked under the weight of fear. Helena's voice sliced through the noise. "Sit down, Marcus." He froze, stunned by her authority. She addressed the room with unwavering clarity. "We verified this evidence days ago. Both internal and external investigations have begun." Marcus's mouth opened in disbelief. You knew?" She nodded slowly. "We will not reward corruption." Panic surged across his face as he looked desperately around the hall for support, but people who once praised him now recoiled, whispering, shaking their heads. "Please," he whispered, voice strangled, "this isn't what it looks like." But the dominoes had already begun to fall. Investors checked their phones as alerts spread. Employees murmured, "I knew something was wrong." Social media notifications buzzed as Sophia uploaded the presentation in real time. Marcus turned toward me, eyes burning with a mixture of rage and terror. "You ruined me," he said hoarsely. I held his gaze, unshaken. "No, you ruined yourself. Chermisday only revealed it." He stared at me, realizing perhaps for the first time that no charm, no manipulation, no lie could save him now. Chermisday had pulled every hidden truth into the light, and there was nowhere left for him to hide. Security officers hurried into the room as Marcus lunged toward the projector, shouting, "Turn it off! You can't do this!" 2 guards intercepted him, pulling him back as he struggled wildly. "I built this department," he screamed, voice breaking. Helena stepped to the podium, her expression carved in stone. "You built it on stolen work and fraud," she said, her tone final. A stunned silence washed over the crowd. Marcus's legs buckled as he sank into a chair, trembling. Witnesses came forward without hesitation. Priya stepped closer. "He told me to delete her files before his presentation." Another coworker added, "I heard him brag about taking credit." A vendor representative lifted documents of altered invoices. Each testimony shattered another piece of the facade Marcus had worn for years. I stood at the side of the stage, feeling a weight I'd carried for so long finally begin to lift. Marcus looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" he whispered. I answered softly, "Because my silence was the only thing protecting you." His tears fell, not of remorse, but fear. He had finally met the consequences he had always believed he could outrun. HR arrived with legal counsel. Forms were signed. His suspension was immediate. Around me, employees approached one by one, offering apologies, sympathy, and quiet admiration. "We're sorry we didn't see it sooner," someone murmured. But none of their words defined my peace. What steadied me was the sight of Marcus, stripped of power, stripped of lies, stripped of the stolen identity he had built. I felt no triumph, no cruelty, only clarity. "Chermisday isn't revenge," I whispered quietly to myself. "It's justice." The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Within 48 hours, the company released a public statement announcing Marcus's termination and full cooperation with investigators. His promotion was revoked before he ever reached the podium. His access was removed, his accounts frozen, and his reputation obliterated across professional networks. News outlets reported phrases like fabricated success, financial misconduct, and stolen intellectual property. Meanwhile, I returned to work with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. People who once avoided me now greeted me warmly. Priya brought me coffee and whispered, "You saved us." Aaron took me to dinner and said, "You look lighter." But Marcus spiraled. He sent long emails alternating between apologies and accusations. "You destroyed my life," one read. "Maybe I made mistakes, but not enough to deserve this," said another. I never responded. Boundaries were part of healing. One afternoon, Helena called me to her office. "How would you feel about leading the new innovation strategies team?" she asked. My breath caught. "Me?" She smiled. "The work was always yours." Accepting the role didn't feel like revenge, it felt like reclamation. 6 months later, my team flourished under my leadership. My confidence returned, rebuilt piece by piece from the ashes of everything he tried to take. Rumors drifted in about Marcus, struggling to find employment, drowning in legal fees, abandoned by the colleagues who once praised him. Sometimes I wondered if he regretted his actions, but I realized his remorse didn't matter. One morning, standing near the window as sunlight spilled across the city, I whispered, "Chermisday taught me something important. Silence is not weakness." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt genuinely free. In the months that followed, Chermisday became a quiet marker of transformation in my life, not a reminder of destruction, but of rebirth. Aaron joked that I should write a book about resilience. Sophia insisted we celebrate the anniversary each year with cupcakes labeled "Truth Wins." But the real victory wasn't Marcus's downfall, it was the return of my voice. I walked through each day with clearer boundaries, stronger instincts, and an inner calm forged from fire.
Leading my team became a joy I had once believed impossible. Sometimes, in meetings, I'd glance at the empty seat that once belonged to Marcus and wonder how different things might have been if he had chosen integrity instead of greed. But I felt no bitterness, only distance, like remembering a room I once struggled to escape. One evening, I returned home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a handwritten note from Marcus. "I'm sorry. I know it's too late." I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as forgiveness, but as closure. Life balances itself when truth is finally allowed to breathe. Today, I mentor young employees who remind me of who I once was: brilliant, quiet, uncertain. I tell them, protect your ideas, protect your voice. Never let anyone convince you that you're background material. Sometimes they ask how I learned that lesson. I smile and answer, Chermisday. Because it wasn't just a date circled in red ink, it was the moment I stopped being the victim of someone else's ambition and became the author of my own story. When I look at my life now, steady, fulfilled, purposeful, I feel no regret. Chermisday taught me that sometimes karma needs a little help, and giving it that help changed everything.